Welcome back. Mr. Abhay, now when it comes to the cost of electricity generation, now as you mentioned, one reason why we are not having power cuts now is because of the coal power plant, which is in full production at the moment. Now, did the government do an analysis of the cost of generating coal over the lifetime of this plant, and how would that work out in terms of, because now we have seen that oil prices can fluctuate wildly. From 27 it can go up to 110 and come back to 50, I mean within just a few months. So how does the price of coal also match up in that scenario? I mean, if we have a situation where coal prices are going to keep on climbing over the next 30 years, then where are we going to be in a sense?
Yeah, actually now if we are to introduce a coal power plant, then we need to think for a long-term planning. It will take about at least 5 years to construct and commission a coal power plant, and then it will be in operation at least for 30 years or probably beyond that. So we are discussing about 35 years, 40 years. Then we need to understand not only coal, all the other technologies, because once we establish a power plant, it will be in operation for a longer time. So we need to look into the long-term trends, and then only we can decide what plant we should construct during which period. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, in addition to those issues, there are other issues. Now let's take the example of Sampur coal power plant. It should have been commissioned about few years back. Now we are in 2016, where it should have been at least a delayed commissioning. Now we are discussing to have a coal power plant in 2021. This delay happened not because of anything else, but due to inefficiency of implementing those decisions. So those issues also come into the picture. Then we are discussing about more than 40 years. So as a whole, we need to understand the trends and then decide which power plant should be constructed, where and when. So the long-term generation planning, which was done by the Ceylon Electricity Board, we have come up with the conclusion. They have come up with the conclusion that always coal is the cheapest option. Now this happened in 1990. This happened in 2000. This happened in 2010. This is happening in 2016 and 17 as well. The model the CEB was using, when they provide certain input data, they come up with the conclusion that coal is the cheapest option. How this happens? It's a serious question, because now the general understanding worldwide is that we are shifting away from the fossil fuel era to a new era, sustainable development era. We can tag it as renewable energy era or something else, but generally the fossil fuel era is over now. Now we are in transition. How can the civilization transfer to a new model, new world, without having much difficulty? So within that framework, we can see that the developed world, they stopped constructing coal power plants about 10-15 years back. Still they get a fair share from coal because of the coal power plants they had commissioned prior to that. So they were utilizing it, that they are trying to retire it as soon as possible. That's the way, that's the general trend within the developed world. And in the developing world, we recently saw that the China and India, the largest populated countries in the world, they were aggressively commissioning coal power plants. But since 2014, now we can see that the China has decided otherwise. Now they are expanding their renewable energy technologies at a rapid way in order to go for the next era. India is following that. So within that context, why Sri Lankan policymakers or the planners believe that coal is the cheapest option? I believe the answer is that they are using some incorrect input data while modeling it. That's the main reason. Now, we do not have coal mines in Sri Lanka, we will never have, but there is a possibility of having probably natural gas in the Mannar Basin, then it's indigenous resources. Renewable energy, we have year round sunshine, blessed with year round sunshine, unlike certain temperate countries. So, we have all the other renewable energy technologies. Being a tropical island, we have the sea, the ocean, we have the ocean energy, lot of resources are there, but we have not tapped yet. So, while doing the long term planning, we shouldn't only look at the financial cost, we should explore the economic cost as well. So, whether we are paying for a foreign company to purchase coal or oil, or we are paying to a Sri Lankan company or a farmer who sells energy or the wood, is it the same? No, it is not so. We should have an economic cost calculation, and there are a number of other factors. Now, worldwide we are discussing about the climate change issue, which is mainly linked with fossil fuels. That is why this shift is happening, because already we have witnessed that the global warming has happened, the average temperature has increased by 1 degree. Within a decade, it will be increasing by another half a degree, and we cannot avoid 2 degrees increase. So, if we are to go ahead with our original fossil fuel power plants, then we are heading towards 5 degrees increase or more. So, it is not possible, and the global leaders, they have agreed that we need to phase out fossil fuels, and mainly coal, which is the most polluting fuel source. So, within that context, there is an economic cost, within that there is an environmental cost, there is a social cost because of the pollution happening, there is health cost involved. So, all those costs should be internalized, then only we can see what is really happening. But unfortunately, the CEB has failed to do a proper generation planning study accommodating all externalities and see what is the real answer. As far as SEMA, the Strategic Enterprise Management Agency, we are supposed to look after 20 state-owned enterprises, one of them is the Ceylon Electricity Board. We have done certain studies which reveal that coal is the most expensive option when we compare with the renewable energies and the natural gas. So, within that context,
expensive option in the sense in terms of social cost, is it?
When you internalize social cost, when you internalize environmental cost, and if you calculate the real economic cost, then having a power plant running for 30 more years, we need to definitely import coal right throughout this period. So, the import cost and the impact on foreign reserves, foreign exchange rate, all those things come into the picture. So, when you internalize all those things, we can clearly see that coal is the cheapest option. Well, there is one more thing more than that, that is the oil. So, we are not considering oil as a cheaper option. So, definitely the renewable energy technologies, and if we have the natural gas potential in the Mannar Basin, then definitely all the other technologies are much cheaper than the coal power plants, but you need to consider the lifetime of the power plant. Then only you can only see, because at present for renewables, now we have two types of renewables, variable renewables.
What you are saying is that once you start something like a coal power plant, you will be held hostage. You have to import that quantity for 40 years.
It's locked. Yeah.
It's locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then if you are to abandon that, then why we build this? Why we construct this power plant at a huge cost? Because we won't be able to get the return during the period. So, the issue between the coal and the renewable energy, most of the renewable energy technologies are, there is no fuel cost involved. If you consider wind, solar, wave, there is no fuel cost involved. It is free. But for biomass, we have cost, fuel cost. But the capital cost of renewable energy is high, whereas oil or coal, you have a fuel cost, and costs are increasing at a rapid rate. If you think of the long term, in spite of the fluctuations, the general trend is increasing. So, if you consider all those things, then if you discuss about the next year's price, we won't be able to get the clear picture, because we have a high capital cost for renewables, which we have to repay. So upfront cost is higher for renewables, whereas the coal cost is spreading right throughout the lifetime of the power plant. So if you consider the full lifetime of the power plant, then you can see that there's no benefit we can get from coal power. So world is moving rapidly away from fossil fuels to the renewable energy and the energy efficiency, demand side management. They are rapidly shifting, making the move, whereas we are still discussing we need to have at least 1 or 2 coal power plants. It's a sad situation, because now the manifesto of the president and the Prime Minister's party all clearly say that we are going flat for renewable energy. Now the government had set a target of achieving 100% indigenous resources by 2030, which is an aggressive target. The blessings of the people are there. I believe 99% of the parliamentarians in the parliament agree to this policy. Unfortunately, there are few among the bureaucrats who think otherwise, and they believe that what they believe should be implemented. So there's a tug of war between the few politicians, few bureaucrats versus the rest of the people. So there we need to concentrate on how we can overcome this hurdle and go for a renewable energy era.
Yeah, Mr. Sirivadana, now as the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka, now have you sort of factored now in the power generation plans for the next period? Have you factored in this cost of generating electricity and the issue of pricing? Now there was this report that you had approved a price increase of 5% for electricity and all that kind of thing. So how does that thing work out?
In terms of costing, like Sri Lanka imports a lot of energy. So something like $2.7 billion worth of energy last year. So that's more than our total agriculture exports. So that's a big impact. So yes, the costing, of course, now we have looked at the parameters used by CEB in the generation plan. Now, if we update it and we see that even coal is expensive than LNG in some cases, if you go for current prices. So yes, there is an impact. I mean, in the short term, we are going to build up few more oil power plants. For 5 years, we are going to have 170 megawatts. So that means in the next 1-2 years, we will see a price increase if the oil prices go up and remain same or under those scenarios. So yeah, that's a concern. Of course, regarding this 5% increase, of course, that's also filing by CEB to increase the prices. Of course, no decision is made so far to do it. So
yeah, what about that issue of the market pricing of energy? Now that was a condition laid down by the IMF, I believe. How is that working out at the moment? I mean, if the price goes up, we end up paying more. So
No.
how does the Commission look at it?
now we have set out a methodology where every 5 years we look at the costing, and every 6 months we look at the forecast generation cost. So based on any change in generation cost, we have a provision to go for a price revision if the government can't come up with a subsidy or some other means to cushion CEB finances. So that method is already there. It's a matter of implementing it regularly. So since 2010 we have been implementing that methodology.
Yeah, Mr. Ralapata, now there was this. Now we were talking about coal, and we are in a transition period moving towards renewable energy. I mean, I suppose there is no argument on that. However, if not for this particular coal plant that we have now, we would have been in absolute deep trouble. So if you look at that, if you look at this whole issue of coal power generation, isn't it the case that over the past few years that they have developed new means of minimizing the pollution that comes from coal power generation. They have minimized it, and how would you react to that?
Yeah, so what's been going on, if you look at it, there were not a lot of choices on our, not a lot of choices available when the Noracchole power plant came in, and the situation is quite different now because there's a lot more types of energy generation methodologies that's available, as well as the pricing is very different. For example,
would you say that having the Noracchole power plant at this particular moment in this transition period was worth it?
I don't think we had much choices in that. But let me answer this in two different ways. What's going on in the world? There's two things that's going on. One is people are understanding a lot more about the type of pollutants that are created through coal power, and with that there are technologies that are developing, at least in part, to address it, because there's nothing called clean coal. You can't have a clean burning coal generation system. The question is how much of the pollutants can you isolate and take off. But also at the same time, natural gas, which is much less polluting than coal, as well as renewable energy technologies are developing, and their technologies are improving, so the efficiencies are improving, as well as price has come down. Now, what is going on in most parts of the world is two-step process. One is existing coal power plants are being retrofit for better environmental performance, as well as other alternative power source generation is coming up. Now, the challenge is what happens to the cost of the coal power plants when you put best available technology for environmental protection. And what happens is that coal power plant no longer becomes cheap or viable from an economic sense. So, to give you a very good example, in America under President Obama, there's a clean power plant, and what they did was they put controls and said, okay, you have to use the best available controls to reduce the sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, fly ash, mercury pollution, heavy metals, right? And the moment you put all of these things, this power plant is quite a lot more expensive than a natural gas power plant. Right? Now, if we are really concerned about the environment and future of the country, we have to bring in whatever power plants that we are bringing in with adequate environmental protection. And the proposed power plants in Sampur in stage 1 or with this Japanese power plant in stage 2, none of them had this. Right? There was no mercury controls, very little sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide controls. So likewise, so CEB does all their costing based on very low numbers, which does not include any of these environmental controls. That's why they can come up and say, oh, coal is cheap. Look, we are getting so cheap coal power plants. Give you a good example. Sampur Indian power plant, the cost that was given by CEB was $1,169 per kilowatt. Right? This is cheaper than Noracchole existing power plant, which is also problematic. Globally, you know, this subcritical power plant costs about $1,800. Right? Now, even if you want to compare capital cost, a natural gas power plant costs $950 per kilowatt. So what we have is this artificial tinkering of numbers, as well as not using good environmentally, you know, coal is anyway polluting, but we are not using proper technologies to arrest the pollution that's coming out of it. And this is what even Ashok is talking about in terms of saying how do we internalize this cost. Because if you go to Noracchole, you see all this damage currently happening in front of your eyes. Right? Yeah. So, what is our future? When we know this?
I would like to come back to that after immediately after the break.
Sure.
But anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Just briefly to say is that when we know this, when better solutions are available, why we are still going after a old technology that is outdated simply defeats the purpose. I simply don't understand why we are still having this conversation in the first place. Right? When other countries are, you know, going to 100% renewable future is not easy. You need lot more technology innovation, you need storage capacity, you need storage technology. There are other technologies that are needed. But unfortunately, we seems to be stuck in some sort of a time warp where every time we go for a conversation, it's asking whether coal should be there or LNG should be there. That's not the conversation we need to have. We need to have is that if you are going to go for 2030 indigenous resources driven power policy, which I think is a great idea, where are the problems in going towards that? How do we use technological innovation? How do we use technologies that do not exist? How do we create these technologies to make this future happen? That's the conversation we need to have, rather than trying to go for 150, 500-year-old technology and saying coal, 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 coal. This is where we need to go.
We'll be taking a short break. Stay with us.